Hello and welcome to another edition of AFL Trade Talk. I'm with Daz as per usual, and you've probably got a little bit of a pep in your step, Daz, because the Saints on the weekend, or on Thursday night game,
yeah,
were very dominant against the Pies. You pretty happy about that one?
Yeah, it was impressive at the start of the year. You look at that as a really tricky fixture, and clearly it was. And the expectation was that Collingwood would bounce back, but they have to wait another week for that. But a Thursday night, it can set up your weekend, or it can ruin your weekend. If you lose on a Thursday or Friday night, it can set a bit of a dampener for your Saturday and Sunday. But a win puts a bit of a pep in your step. And
Spoken like a true AFL supporter.
Yeah,
right?
and the pessimistic Saints fan as well. But nice to get going. They were pretty good in round one against Geelong and fell short. So it was important that they didn't go 0-2 because they were playing reasonably well.
I don't think that there were many big surprises across the weekend. I think it was pretty stock standard. Probably the biggest one was how dominant the Saints were against the Pies. Probably the scoreline doesn't really indicate how much better the Saints were. I don't think Collingwood were very good. St Kilda obviously won by 15 points. But let's talk through our highs and lows of the weekend. Do you want to kick us off with your highlight?
Yeah, a bit of a 90s feel about the weekend, I thought. We had some shootouts, a bit like the 90s. Sydney-Essendon was a shootout. Richmond-Port Adelaide, similar. And with those games, particularly Sydney-Essendon, came a bit of fireworks as well. There was a bit of aggro and push and shove. And, one thing they used to talk about a lot during the 90s, that it's a bit of a phrase that they don't mention a lot anymore, is the premiership quarter being the third term. And you look at most of the victories. St Kilda set it up in the third. Geelong set it up in the third. Sydney set it up in the third. Fremantle, Port Adelaide both had dominant third quarters as well. So, yeah, we saw a bit of that throwback with some, high marks and spectacular goals. So I enjoyed the weekend.
Well, we touched on it for a second. My highlight is easily St Kilda, and we don't need to go into it too much, but I was just so impressed with them. But particularly, Saints fans should be very happy with Marcus Windhager, because that bloke knows how to play footy the right way. He's tough. He goes hard at it. That's the same as tough. I just love the way he evades players. He's really light on his feet, but also heavy when he attacks the footy. So, I love the way Marcus Windhager plays footy, and he's one that the Saints fans really want to see become one of their better players. And I certainly think he's on the right track.
Yeah, for the romantics in footy too, Windhager got moved this year from number 17 to number 2, and that's the best game of his career in Spuds round, or Spuds game, wearing his old number 2. So it's a hell of a night to have a breakout game. Tagged Nick Dacos. We've seen him do a job in the past on Lachie Neale when they've played Brisbane. So hopefully for him, that's the launching pad. St Kilda have got a couple of highly rated kids in Wanganeen Miller and Owens and even Philippou to a degree. So for them to add Windhager into that group will be a massive boost.
What about a low light?
Spoke about it last week, injuries. We had more of that again.
Yeah.
Look, Nick Caulfield in his first game at the Bulldogs getting injured. The Mason Wood one on Thursday night looked really, really ugly. I think a lot of people would have been watching that very concerned. Not just knocked out, he's ended up breaking a collarbone. I mean, that could have been a lot worse than that, but it just feels like we're, for the early part of the season, whether it's just the ballistic pace that the game's getting played at, but we're getting a lot of injuries.
Even a couple like Dion Prestia.
Correct.
The news has come out today. He's going to spend 10 weeks on the sideline. Massive blow for Richmond, because, he's a player that's certainly needed there. I'm going to put my hand up this week, Daz. I'm the low light. I backed Dacos in the Brownlow Medal because I thought that Collingwood were going to get their first win of the season against the Saints, and that wasn't to be. Collingwood were no good, which meant Dacos obviously wasn't going to poll in that game anyway. Very, very quiet in the third term. I think he only had 2 touches, and then going into the fourth, he got a little bit of footy, but it just was ineffective. And it probably leads me to a point that I want to make is, a couple of things about the Pies, because they probably could be the low light as well. For me, Dacos has to go back to the back line. I think where he proves to be a really quality player is the way he moves the ball, and he brings a sense of unpredictability to the way that Collingwood take the ball forward. I think they're really predictable and very slow off the half back line at the moment. What I love that Dacos does, and I think is so effective, is he really has a look at those 45s, but not towards the boundary. He looks inboard, and that's the quickest way to the goals. So for me, he's been a little bit soft in the middle. I know a lot of has come out on social media about him not going hard at the ball. I don't really have an issue with that, because he's not the in and under player that Collingwood need. He's good on the outside, But at the end of the day, it's a bit of a waste when he keeps on being in front of the opposition in circumstances where he has to go hard at the ball, and he's not. He's letting down his team, but maybe Fly is letting him down. He should be on the half-back line just for now. The other one is, and I'd love for Collingwood fans, if they're listening, to please pop in the comments, let us know, but why isn't John Noble playing? He hasn't played since late last year. He was obviously controversially dropped out of the finals. Collingwood went on to win the premiership, so it seemed like a good decision. But they just seem so slow on the half-back line, and it's something that John Noble can definitely fix. And he's someone that has good foot skills that can definitely pierce his kicks through the middle of the ground. So I want to know why John Noble's not playing. He's not injured. He's certainly one that potentially could help Collingwood, especially out of the back line.
Definitely. I think they need to change a few things up. I mean, on the Dacos tip, I think you were certainly justified in doing that. He had 42 touches last time the two sides played. Collingwood won the game last time they played. I think moving him to halfback, whilst players still get a bit of attention there, you don't get tagged as much. Teams are reluctant to play forwards in negative roles, so it does get Dacos away. He can be a lot more creative. We see so many good players launch through that part of the ground. So I think some of the overall criticism of Nick Dacos has been really harsh. I mean, it's hard to imagine a player having a more influential first 50 games. He would have won the Brownlow last year if he wasn't injured. He started on grand final day. He's probably his team's best player. He's 20 years of age. Not everybody's perfect at everything. His frame probably doesn't lend himself to being bash and crash like Christian Petrarca or anything like that. So as much as he might be a tiny bit down on form, I think the criticism of Nick has been a little bit over the top.
A really interesting one is, Daz, before we move on, is I find that the best and fairest players are players that your team can't win without. So I think Rowan Marshall is basically that player. I think without Rowan Marshall, I don't think St Kilda can win games. It's really interesting because Nick Dacos is extremely talented and very good for Collingwood. But if he was out of this side now, I don't necessarily think Collingwood would be any better chance of winning. I think they would, I think they would be the same chance at winning. They could potentially win without Nick Dacos. So he's not being as influential as what he should be. And that probably rates him a little bit too high in terms of being that best and fairest sort of player, even though stereotypically the competition looks at Nick Dacos as just one of the best. But at the moment, he's not helping his side win. He certainly didn't do that on the weekend. So
you'd argue, say, Petrarca and Bontempelli at their clubs, arguably the most important. I mean, Max Gawn's probably in that conversation, but maybe you compare Nick Dacos to Lachie Neale. I'd argue Brisbane could afford to lose Lachie Neale before they lost Joe Danaher, for example. I think Joe Danaher would hurt them far more if he was out of the side. So it is fascinating, that conversation. I mean, you mentioned Rowan Marshall. The consensus would be that Jack Sinclair probably St Kilda's best player, but I'd agree Rowan Marshall's absence would hurt them much more.
100%. Well, Daz, can I just say, I mean, I'm such a fanboy of the Brownlow Medal, especially the markets on the Betfair Exchange, and that hasn't changed at all because I think it is such an open medal this year. There's so many chances, and that makes trading really, really come to the fore in this Brownlow market at the moment. So it's really exciting. We're going to take a look and have a chat about the Brownlow predictions as we do every single week. Our predictions model comes in and has Tom Green on top, and he's the new Brownlow Medal favourite on the Betfair Exchange. That happened since, I think, Sunday it was announced, which is massive news, Daz, don't you think?
Absolutely. And Tom Green played that off-Broadway game on Sunday, the 7 o'clock night match in the West against the Eagles, which the Giants won easily, and he dominated that. And look, he's been outstanding. And you compare him with, say, Isaac Heaney, who's second in the predictor. The Swans have been adamant that he'll continue to play the role he's been playing now. Obviously, they'll get Mills and a number of other players back, Taylor Adams through the middle of the ground, and there'd been some speculation that might send Heaney forward more. But if they keep persisting with him in that role, then he's clearly going to be a big chance as well. But Tom Green, as it stands at the moment, is, as you say, favourite at the about $7.80, yeah, but then you get Heaney back to 12s. Caleb Sarong, who we mentioned at the start, at 13.50s, and there's a couple of players in the 20s that are good value in Clayton Oliver and Errol Goulden.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because on our Brownlow Medal predictor, we've got Tom Green on top with 8 votes, Isaac Heaney 7 votes. Caleb Sarong, 5.5 votes. Matt Rao, 5. Zach Butters, 5. Maybe going a little bit under the radar. Obviously, Port didn't play opening round. He's had 2 and 3 in the last couple of games, according to our predictor. And the other one, Christian Petrarca, there, 4.5 votes. So, yeah, I think it's a really open Brownlow medal. If we look at the market, it is actually very similar to what the Brownlow predictions are saying. The only difference is Marcus Bontempelli, I don't think is there. He's only predicted to have 2.5 votes for the year so far, but still very firm in the market.
And his first vote's predicted to be that game they just played on Sunday where he's had 32 and kicked a couple. So that would have seen him move a little bit in the market, and we know he's a proven vote getter. I mean, Nick Dacos, $11.50. He was probably $3 or $4 at this stage last year. And I still think there's potential for him to get 30 Brownlow votes from here. So, yeah, I think what you're getting is a better price on Nick Dacos now.
So as we look at the Brownlow medal market, we've got 6 players that are under $12, which is pretty remarkable. $13. Yeah, that's remarkable. And I think there's still a lot of value around some players that will definitely move. Christian Petrarca, finally on the board. He's $19 on the exchange so far. Zach Butters, $14.50, so that he's shortened slightly. But Clayton Oliver got tagged out at the weekend. His price has sort of stayed the same. But one I want to talk about quickly is Patrick Cripps. Our Brownlow predictor didn't have him getting votes in the first game. I certainly think he gets 1 or 2 in that one, and he definitely gets the 3 votes. The next game, obviously, Carlton had the bye. His price, for whatever reason, hasn't moved. It's been rock solid around that $22 mark. I think after the game against Richmond, it firmed into 18. But at $22, I think Patrick Cripps is a definite buy this week.
Yeah, the last couple of winners, Cripps 22, as you say, I think he's humming along nicely. And then you throw in, I know Brisbane have struggled in the first 2 weeks, and he wouldn't have votes in the first 2 weeks. But again, Lachie Neale's $36 to win the Brownlow. You could certainly see if they start winning games that he'll start to pick up votes. So I wouldn't have him as my favourite to win it, but you'd start to look later in the year around those top 5s and top 3s again for Lachie Neale if he can find some form.
Just quickly before we move on, is there anyone that you want to back this week on the current odds?
Probably, I think Sydney will win again this week. So Errol Goulden at the 20s, I think he's an absolute running machine. He's sort of gut-busting running through the middle of the ground, and he's starting to find some real form for the Swans, who have got Richmond this week, who won't necessarily hard tag him. So I think he's a decent chance to get some votes.
At the moment, I can't take Rao. I think he's getting close to lay odds. Currently $11.50 on the exchange. I love Rao. I just don't think he can sustain it for the year. And I actually think their better Brownlow chance is going to be Noah Anderson. By the end of the year, I think Noah Anderson is going to have more votes than Matty Rao. Isaac Heaney, if he's staying in the midfield, he's a Brownlow chance. So it just depends what Horse does with him. That's why his price is going to be really interesting. But yeah, for me, I think I'm getting really close to laying Matt Rao. I definitely will back Paddy Cripps at $22, I think is value. And yeah, I think it's an exciting market.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a bit of a segue into the next segment for me. I think there's a lot of value in the Brownlow this time around, especially given some players have played twice and some have played 3 times. So there's a free hit coming for some players while some of their rivals have a buy.
Well, let's go to it. We're going to go to buy, hold and sell now. Our buy is our back, our hold, we're just holding, and our sell is our lay. Who are you buying this week, Daz?
Yeah, buying a number of those players around the $20 mark in the Brownlow. Goulden at 20s, Oliver 21, Cripps 22. They're probably the 3 that I like at the moment at the price, who should be much shorter, and I think will be much shorter than that for the rest of the year.
I'm going to buy Charlie Curnow for the Coleman this year. He's kicked 3+ goals in 6 of his last 10 games, and he loves Marvel Stadium. He's kicked multiple goals in his last few games there. I think it included a 6-goal haul and a 10-goal haul, obviously against West Coast. He also loves playing North. He's kicked 6 and 3 in his last 2 games against them. The other one that I want to buy as well very quickly is Harry Mackay. He's been so dangerous and he loves playing North as well. Still hasn't played his brother and is not going to get the opportunity against North. Obviously, Ben has gone to Essendon, but he's kicked 4 and 4 against them in his last couple of games, and he's kicked 3 and 3 in his first couple of games this year. And I think that Marvel Stadium is a great ground for his kicking. No win because they're going to close the roof. So I'll also be having a look at 3+ goals on the exchange for both those players against North as well.
Yeah, the conspiracy theorists will enjoy that. Ben Mackay over at Essendon now, so they won't get to play on each other, and they play the next day. So the rumours are that they are indeed the same person. So that'll be a curious watch.
Who are you holding this week, Daz?
I know you've got similar. So did you want to go first? So I don't steal your thunder.
No, I looked at yours and I just agree with you.
So I've gone with 2 only based on the draw in Fremantle and Melbourne, like what both of them are doing. So Fremantle got Adelaide in Perth this week. I think they'll probably win that on form, but then they play Port Adelaide away and Carlton. So they play 2 potential top 4 sides after that. So that'll give an indication as to how good Fremantle are, whether they're a potential top 8 side or not. And Melbourne, back-to-back Adelaide games, Port Adelaide away and the Crows away. So I think Melbourne certainly look pretty good and they look a chance for top 4, but neither of those games is easy. So maybe see where Fremantle and Melbourne sit at the end of that.
Interesting that Freo and Carlton game is at Adelaide Oval.
Yeah, during Gather Round, yep.
Yeah, I think that bodes well for Carlton. They play quite well there, except the Gather Round last year, nightmares. I'm holding Fremantle, exactly. I actually saw your notes, struggling to find a hold, and I just completely agree with you. I think that's a great call. Sell. Who are you selling, Daz?
Not because he's done anything wrong, but Harley Reid only on price. He started well. He looks a very good player, and he's going to get a lot of opportunities at the West Coast Eagles to do that. But I think it is such an even rising star race. We've seen Wardlaw get the nomination this week, so he's 460 second favourite. His teammate Colby McKercher is going to be pretty hard to beat as well. And then even guys around the double figure mark, Caleb Windsor, Darcy Wilson. I know there's big raps on Riley Sanders at the Bulldogs too. So Harley can certainly win it, but I think it's a very even race and he's too short.
Great call, Daz. Yeah, Harley Reid is very, very short. I'll be laying again there. Have already laid him and he's trimmed up again. I don't know why. I just think other players have definitely been a little bit better than him. So I think that's a great call, Daz. I didn't have a sell here, but I reckon I've talked myself into selling Matt Rowell. I think he's probably almost the shortest I think he'll get to all year. I mean, it would have to take an outstanding game after the bye, 30 touches and a goal performance, say. But for the main reason is I think Noah Anderson is Gold Coast Brownlow player. He's going to steal votes off Matt Rowell, and I think Noah Anderson is starting to hit his straps a little bit more. So, for me, I think Matt Rowell's as short as he's probably going to get, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think you'll see. I mean, Toot Miller was very good over the last couple of weeks. You mentioned Anderson, so I can certainly see him coming back to the pack a little bit, even though he's obviously had a very good year.
Let's talk about a couple of games this weekend, Daz. The first one is the clash on Thursday night. It's between the Lions and Collingwood. Both teams are yet to hit the winners list so far.
So one of them obviously has to. It was the first time ever that both grand finalists started 0-2. Now Collingwood is 0-3. A bit unlucky to have lost 3 games in 2 rounds, but obviously we know that there was a round 0 this year. But Brisbane, I just look at their Gabba game against Carlton in round 1. They were 8 goals up. They missed some chances in the second half. They lost by a point. One of Carlton's great wins, I think, of the modern era. I still think that form from Brisbane would stack up okay. They were really poor in the West against Fremantle, but their road form is a completely different story. So I do like Brisbane in that game. Collingwood will eventually hit their straps. They're too good not to. But I think even if they do, beating Brisbane at the Gabba is pretty hard.
It's going to be pretty hard. I'm not 100% sure with this one. I just think on the Lions' current form, though, $1.38 around that $1.40 range is very, very short. If you're getting 3+ about Collingwood, I think they're worth a bet. They've got a very, very tough job up there, but I think their odds should be closer to 250 given Carlton broke that Gabba record where the Lions hadn't lost there in almost 2 seasons. So,
and what do you get on that price? So Collingwood, the line will be 17, so you could even look at a handicap on Collingwood at that price.
Currently on the Betfair Exchange, Brisbane are $1.44 and Collingwood are $3.20. That's big odds for Collingwood. I actually think there could be a good strategy there. I think they're going to be closer to evens at some point. So setting your odds on Brisbane to $2 and seeing if that gets matched in play, and obviously doing that beforehand, is a pretty good strategy there because I'm happy to back Brisbane. I think they're going to win that game. I think the odds will get closer to $2 there.
Yep. Yeah.
We're going to go over to Port and Melbourne, I think it is.
Yes, at the Adelaide Oval.
What do you think, Daz?
D's are $2.78, Port $1.55. I mean, understand why Port are favourites, given it's at the Adelaide Oval. I did mention earlier that Melbourne are a hold. I still think the odds should be a bit closer in that game. Maybe Melbourne 2.30, 2.40 perhaps, but nearly 2.80 they are at the moment. So I still think that's a little bit of value on them. It is difficult to beat Port Adelaide at the Adelaide Oval, but I think Melbourne, top 4 side for 3 or 4 years, are as good a chance as any. I think last year when they played over there, they lost by 2 points or something like that. So I could see that being a really tight contest.
How much better do Melbourne look going forward with Cozzy Pickett in their side?
Yeah, I mean, the other issue for them is at the other end because they lost May and Lever, which meant Petty had to go back. I mean, they had Brown forward with Pickett. Petty was playing forward and had to go back. So that hurts them a little bit. But yeah, Pickett just gives them a lot of life and Fritsch looks like he started the year in pretty good form.
So I'm just having a look here. Port Adelaide $1.55 taking on Melbourne. They're $2.78. I think that obviously those two, Lever and May, are pillars of their defence. Very, very important players. If neither of them are playing, surely Port Adelaide's odds trim up a little bit more.
You'd think so. I mean, I know May copped the knee right in the ribs in that game and Lever a little twinge to the knee, I think, late when he landed in the marking contest. But yeah, their availability, or at least one of them, will be pivotal to their chances.
Let's talk about the Dockers and the Crows, Daz.
Exactly the same odds in that game. Fremantle $1.55, Adelaide $2.78. The Crows have started the season nearly identically to last year. They lost a round 1 game on the road that was considered 50-50 and then surprisingly dropped a home game. Last year it was to Richmond and this year to Geelong. So a bit like last year, they need to hit their straps pretty soon, the Crows. And Fremantle haven't done anything wrong in the first 2 weeks, but as we mentioned, they are a bit of a hold as to how they handle a challenging few weeks. They deserve to be favourites, and the Crows did lose a lot of away games last year. So I actually think those odds are closer to being right than the Port Adelaide Melbourne ones. Yep,
I also think it's probably good odds to back Adelaide in because I think they're sure to hit their straps soon. We held on Fremantle. I'm still not 100% sure on them. Yep. They were brilliant, obviously, the second half against North. I mean, it was North at the end of the day, very, very young side playing. I think Freo kicked 10 of the last 13 goals or whatever it was. Quite significant. I'm probably looking at backing Adelaide there because I think the price is a good one.
North being a young side, unfortunately that can happen, hits the wall. They had 3 shots to go 6.5, 7 goals up in the second quarter, North, and missed them. Fremantle kicked 2 right before half-time, so they were only 17 points down, I think, at half-time, and then steamrolled them in the second half. You just wonder if North take those chances and are 38 points up at half-time, what that game looks like.
Let's talk about the Bombers and the Saints, Daz. Who do you think is going to win that one?
A couple of tribunal cases will be interesting. Obviously, Peter Wright straight to the tribunal for the hit on Harry Cunningham, and Max King was given a week for a behind-the-ball bump against Collingwood on Finn McRae, whose brother's obviously been a talking point as well at the Doggies. But if either of those players play, that probably changes things a little bit. I think St Kilda probably the marginally better of the two on the evidence of the first 2 weeks, but it's a very tight contest. And again, probably closer to parity in the odds, but maybe St Kilda just.
Hopefully Essendon get to welcome back Darcy Parish as well. Like it, He's been out the last couple of weeks, but Zach Merritt was terrific last week. St Kilda, I just want to ask about Max King. From memory, St Kilda have actually got some wins on the board without Max King playing.
Well, last year, so the Saints won 13 games last year, 7 of them without Max King. Yeah. Obviously, he didn't play till about round 10. So they did show they could get the job done, and Anthony Caminiti would probably be the one to come in. Obviously, they lost Liam Henry and Mason Wood as well out of that game, but it's all about system with Ross Lyon, as we know. It's, one soldier down, one soldier up, and they'll back themselves to at least be able to bring something competitive to the table, and I think they'll do that regardless.
Before we talk about a couple of bets, let's just do one more game. It's North Melbourne versus Carlton, the Good Friday game. They played last year, and North Melbourne actually gave Carlton a bit of a run for their money. Carlton won by a couple of goals in the end, but it was a pretty tight game.
Yeah, it was a good game. I think North were inaccurate in the first half and might have even led by 3 or 4 goals at one stage in the second quarter. So I think it'll be similar to what we saw from North on the weekend. They're starting to put some really good patches together. I just don't know if they'll do it long enough. And Carlton, probably too much talent all over the park. I think they'll outlast North in a competitive game, win by 5 goals probably.
Carlton don't have any significant injury issues right now where players are missing 2-3 weeks. I know a couple of players are almost ready to come back. I mean, sorry, we should say Doherty, obviously ACL. They're ones that we don't really think about now from week to week. But in terms of Carlton, what would you do if you were them? Would you rush a player back for North Melbourne if they're kind of ready, or would you say, no, we got North Melbourne, let's just give it another week?
It's probably one where if they were having that conversation, they'd probably have it reasonably privately in the sense that the coaches might be talking about it themselves, but obviously they wouldn't make that known publicly to poke the bear or anything like that. They'd probably manage it and think, we go to Perth in a couple of weeks, or they go to Adelaide rather for Gather Round, and we've got these tough contests. We might sort of look at it that way. I think early in the season, you're not going to rush those decisions anyway. But then again, whether you play Welsh in the VFL, probably not. So if he's right to go, he's probably right to go.
One thing I'm looking forward to, though, is hopefully Alistair Clarkson says, Georgie Wardlaw, go stand next to the big guy, Paddy Cripps, and take him on. And, Paddy Cripps might give him a lesson, but that's what Georgie Wardlaw needs in the young stage of his career. Will obviously help him develop.
Big body, so he feels he can compete. Wardlaw is a bull, so it'll be a nice learning experience for him.
Well done, Georgie. He was the rising star of last week. Just quickly, 2 bets I'm going to have in that game. Charlie Curnow, 3+ goals, and Harry Mackay, 3+ goals. They've been playing really well together, and I think you're going to get a pretty good price on the Betfair Exchange. The corporates have been dishing up some pretty horrible prices there. So, certainly one for the Betfair Exchange. Any other bets you're having across the weekend, Daz?
Don't mind the price on a couple of those favourites. I think Sydney at $1.34. I know that's relatively short, but I think they'll be too strong in that game. And then probably the other one would be, as you say, the trading strategy around Brisbane at the price that they're up at $1.44. So, don't mind those, but I think Sydney would be too strong against the Tigers.
I'm just having a look, and my prediction for this week, whilst I'm not sure whether I'll have bets in these games, we'll see, but I think this could be a round of upsets, Daz, because I have a look at the fixture. The Lions are a short price favourite against Collingwood. I think Collingwood could definitely win that. I don't think North can beat Carlton. I'm having a look at the Dockers taking on Adelaide. The Dockers are very short. I think Adelaide could win that one. Continuing down, Essendon are in really good form. They're $2.34. St Kilda $1.60. There's no reason why Essendon can't win that one.
50-50, yep.
Could be a little bit closer to 50-50. And look, Melbourne, if they've got their 2 bigs out, it should definitely drift their price a little bit. But it's also they're a very good side. Against Port Adelaide, currently they're $1.48, very short. There could be an upset there. I'm not sure whether the West Coast Eagles are going to beat the Doggies, but you never know.
They did last year, that same fixture. The other favourite I think is a reasonable price. I think Geelong $1.41 against a banged up Hawthorn on Monday will be too strong.
So I think there's going to be a few upsets on the weekend. Hopefully the Blues win. That's and that's not
that
an upset.
Would be an upset.
That's
if North got the job done in that.
That's the key one. Well, a couple of trading strategies there. Daz, maybe send over your watch list. We'll chuck some bets up on the Trade Talk page. If you're listening on Spotify, rate us. Leave a comment if you can. Feedback. Let us know what you want to learn about. We're looking at doing a bit of an education segment in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, we talk a lot about trading. And it's maybe evident that a few new listeners don't know how to trade on the Betfair Exchange. It's a fantastic way to potentially lock in a profit there. And if you can predict what's going to happen, as a lot of AFL pundits try to do, and we try to do a great job of it as well, you can potentially get some pretty good value on the exchange, right, Daz? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, what you're looking for is to get both options as an underdog. So Brisbane, Collingwood, for example, Brisbane $1.44. If Collingwood kick the first 2, you might get $2 on Brisbane, and sure enough, you've got a profit whichever way you go.
Well, full show on YouTube and Spotify, tips on the Trade Talk page, and we'll see you next week.
What are you really gambling with? For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.